Hi everyone. In this lesson, we're going to quickly sketch out our ideas for making a model of a character from Among Us. So, if I take a look, these guys are very simple, though sometimes they have interesting hats. But we will be concerned with making something that looks a bit like our guy, and we'll make a flat version and a standing up one. So, we're going to think about how we can make him out of basic shapes before we get started in Tinkercad. And as he is round like this, you can see that we've got cylinders and they can be joined together with boxes and some more boxes for the legs. Along with, we'll see if we like a cylinder or a box for our faceplate. And while these guys have a backpack, if we make them flat, it's not going to be very visible on there. So if we make a standing up version of him, we can think of this as a cylinder for his body, but to make him round on the top and bottom, we'll be adding spheres to it. Just a three-dimensional version of the cylinders and boxes that we have going on in our flat version. And we'll be using some cylinders for the legs and our faceplate here and backpack. So we should be able to make this guy with very few shapes. So let's move these guys off to the side and start a brand new one. I'm going to go up here to the cylinder and we'll turn the sides up to make it smooth. We're going to need to attach some spheres to it to make it round on both sides. So let's drag the sphere in and see what we can do with it. It has a number of steps here, which I also want to increase because that makes it smoother. If we go all the way down, it becomes a little polygon. So let's take our sphere here, and just like everything else, it comes in at a default of 20 millimeters. Since this is 20 millimeters tall, I want the sphere to stick halfway up the top. I'm going to click on my up and down arrow here, and I'm going to make it go 10 millimeters up, so it's halfway up. It can be hard to drag this into the right place. If you move it anywhere, you can then click on the number here, shown in the measurement of how high you've moved it, and just type in the number you want. And now it is exactly 10 millimeters from the floor. Now we can stick it right on top. And rather than moving around like this, you can always use the Align tool. If you click and drag in an empty space and select both of these objects, we can click on the Align tool and then center them. Be sure to center it in both directions. So now we have most of our shape. Let's click on this guy, and since he's already in the right place, we're going to use duplicate to make a copy in the exact same spot. And then we're going to grab our up and down handle carefully and drag it down under the ground so it's at -10. Now it's sticking halfway out the bottom, just like the opposite one sticking halfway out the top. So let's group our new shape together by dragging a box around all three, and we'll hit group, and I'll make this guy a different color. He'll be green. There we go. All right. So now, while he's perfectly cylindrical, I think our shape will look a little nicer if he's squashed a bit. So I'm going to shorten him a little, and from up above, I'm going to grab one of these black handles in the center and just squash it a little bit in this direction. So he's not a perfect cylinder. Now, we've got to raise him up so we can put some legs under him. There we go. And it's up to you how long you feel his legs should be. So I'm going to leave him 8 millimeters up, and we're going to get some cylinders to use for his legs. With a new cylinder, I've got to change the number of sides up to make it smooth like the rest of my design. And then, to make it shorter, I'm going to hold down Shift while I click on this top handle here. And that's going to shrink all of the dimensions at once. So instead of just making it shorter, it's becoming shorter in all 3 directions. So let's see. It looks like 7 is maybe a little bit too small. 8 seems like a good size for a leg. All right. Now that it's 8 in all directions, I'm just going to grab the handle at the top here without holding Shift and make it tall enough that it'll stick inside of our character. Now I can use the arrow keys to move it around until I've got it inside there. That's looking good. Maybe line it right up with the edge. We can also use the Align tool at this point. Instead of moving it around, we can select both objects, click on Align, and I can put the legs right in the center, and it's lined up with the edge already. That looks good. Now I can click my leg, duplicate it, and then use the arrow keys to move it over to the other side. This guy's a little bit longer legged than my other ones. I think I'll make him shorter by just grabbing this and dragging it down a little bit. There we go. Looks funnier with short legs. Now that we've got our body and legs, we need our visor and our backpack. I'm going to make both of those out of boxes using that same technique I did with the flat one. We'll start by dragging out a brand new box, and I'll make it white. So I should make these legs green to match while I am color coding things. And we're going to take the radius and increase it, and we'll increase the steps so it's very smooth. So now we have a rounded box. I'm going to change our height here so that it is much more of a rectangle. And we'll make the whole thing a bit smaller in every direction. Let's look at this from the front and raise this visor up until we think it's at the right height. Now with perspective on, it can be hard to figure out where things are lining up. So we can go down here and switch to flat view, just like we did for our other designs, and click on the front side of this cube. Now I can see, looking at it straight on, exactly how high this visor is. Let's make it a little bit narrower. Oh, that looks good. And now we can put it right in the center of his head by clicking and dragging. Oops. Don't want to move the legs, only the visor and the body. Now I can click on Align, but when I'm looking at it from here, all I can see is the up and down alignment. So I have to right click and drag to move my view so I can see. Now if I wanted to put this visor right in the middle of the body, it would move both of them. So I have to click on the body, and now my little alignment bubbles will line up with the body. So now if I click on center, let's click on the front there we go. Now it lines up my second part without moving my first part. Oop, almost forgot. Align and center. There we go. Just make him look like he kind of has angry eyebrows at this point. But I'm going to click on this visor and move him out one, just so that looks a little bit better. I'm going to increase the radius, make it a little bit smoother. All right. Now that I've got a visor on my spacesuit, I'm going to make a backpack, and we're going to use the same thing. So I'm just going to duplicate this guy. And we will use the arrow keys to move our duplicate out to the back of him. His backpack is going to be the same color as his body. And we just need to change the shape. Zoom in a bit so we can see this. We'll drag this up so it's taller, and drag this one in so it's narrow. Now I think we have a good backpack shape. We just have to grab this upper handle and lower it down. Maybe make it a little shorter than that. And there we go. Now our little guy has a backpack and a visor. And you can have some fun trying to make a hat for him, or borrow the one out of the Characters tab. There are a few pre-made things that you can add. Whoops. There we go. All right. There is our Among Us character. And we are going to take a look at printing for our standing up figures. Since they are flat on their feet, it'll be a good way to print them, but they do have some overhanging areas in the backpacks. And I'll show you what happens when you have something like a hat, which many of them do. If you guys have added a hat, you're going to see that there will be more supports necessary to make sure that it comes out right. So I'll select my standard guy here and export him. Selected shape only, STL. And then I will select my guy with a hat here and export him. That way I can show you both. So we'll choose STL again. And since Tinkercad always names it the same name as this, we've got two different numbered ones, 1 and 2. So let's head over to Cura. I've got my printer and plastic set up, and we're on the slightly higher quality setting. So since we have a lot of nice curves, we want to go with a smaller layer height to make them appear smoother. Let's open up number 1. And we can see that he has a few red highlights, which are faces that are pointing downwards, but don't have anything underneath them to hold them up. So let's head over here and in the support, support, there we go. We want to click on Generate Support, and we can leave the basic settings. We want to do normal supports that are touching the build plate. Everything over 50 degrees is good. I think the default is 45. Oh, 51, interesting. Dynamic quality means better supports. So let's go to Slice and see how it looks. So this guy is going to take an hour. And if we preview him, we'll see that for the supports, it's going to build a small tiny section right underneath between his legs and one underneath the backpack. It doesn't think that it needs any underneath his visor because even though it sticks out and overhangs a little bit, it goes up in a smooth curve. It doesn't really hang out that far, so it should be fine. All right, I'm going to save this guy so that he is ready to print. And then we're going to switch over to our second guy and see what happens when we have a hat or another object sticking out. You can see the entire underside of the hat is red because even at 50 degrees, this is well over 50 degrees. Trouble with this hat too is that it has this little propeller, and the propeller has some downward facing areas that are going to fall apart. So let's see what would happen if we left it at normal touching build plate, which means it's only going to print supports if it can shoot them straight down to the build plate. Let's go to preview and take a look. So you can see we need to build a lot more supports here because we have to hold up the entire brim of the hat and it's got to go around its face. Now this looks like it could work, but we can see that because of this little propeller beanie here, we are going to have a problem. If we scroll down, we'll see that as we get here, we have an island. We have a layer here that is not attached to any other layer, which means when we get all the way up to 278, the printer will just be drawing plastic out in the air and it'll just fall down, stick to his hat. So the propeller is going to fall apart. And if we head down even further, we can probably see another problem at the back edge of the hat. There it is. Right there, because the back edge of the hat goes down, we have another island floating in space. Everything else should work well. So we can get past this problem by changing this to everywhere. Now it's going to try to build supports even if they're on top of the model. Now at this point, I would probably go back in and move my hat around so that I didn't have this problem in the back here. We'll have supports underneath this part of the hat, and we'll have supports underneath the little propellers. And you can see that I could easily grab these supports with a little cutter or a pair of needle nose pliers and pull them right out from under that propeller. That looks fine. But in here, it'll be very hard to remove them. If you have an overhang that's very close to something else, it can be a problem. And rather than clean it up afterwards, I could go back into Tinkercad and move his hat or shrink it down a bit so it lines up with his head better and doesn't have this overhang. If you've added a hat on yours, take a look and make sure that it's going to print in a way that you think you can clean it up good. And if not, head back to Tinkercad and fix it.